It being just a little past 6 p.m., I'll go ahead and call the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors to order for a special session for March 29th, 2022. The county clerk has confirmed the roll, and we do have a quorum this evening in person and on Zoom. So the first items on the agenda are the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by Supervisor Powers. If you could please all stand in joining me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now the invocation by Supervisor Powers.
Of your charity, we've been asked to remember 2 long-serving county workers in Wisconsin who have died since our last meeting. Please remember Winnebago County employee Tony Schwarmer and Fond du Lac County Executive Alan Biekel. I also ask your prayers in honoring all Vietnam veterans on this Vietnam Veteran Day. Thank yous are offered to those who served, and we remember those who did not return home for more. Great Creator of all nations and people, in whose perfect kingdom no sword is drawn, but the sword of righteousness. No strength is known but the strength of love. So guide the nations of the world into a way of peace, especially protect the people of Ukraine from violence and destruction. And close to home, we ask you to give guidance tonight in our deliberations for all people in Winnebago County. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next item on the agenda is a motion to adopt this evening's agenda. For that, I'll call on Supervisor Albrecht. Supervisor Albrecht? I'll call on Vice Chair Egan for a motion to adopt this evening's agenda.
I make a motion that we adopt tonight's agenda.
Is there a second? There is a second, so there's a motion and a second to adopt this evening's agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Chairman, you're muted.
Shiloh, you're muted.
I'll go ahead and repeat that. Next item on the agenda is a time during each meeting in which we give an opportunity for the
You're muted, Shiloh.
I apologize, for some reason I'm becoming muted while I'm speaking, so I'll repeat it again. We're now at a time in the meeting in which we give an opportunity from the public to speak related to any item on our agenda this evening or any item under county jurisdiction. All I'd ask is that anyone from the public who wishes to speak to please raise their Zoom hand and we'll call on them in succession. Once we call on them, we'd ask them to give their name and address for the record. And we would ask, as we do see a number of individuals from the public who I anticipate would like to speak, to please keep your comments to 3 minutes. We'll open it up from the public. Anyone who wishes to speak this evening, please go ahead and raise your Zoom hand. I'll first call on Lori Palmieri. Your mic is open.
Good evening. My name is Lori Palmieri, and I serve as the mayor on the Oshkosh Common Council. First, I want to thank the county board members and County Board of Supervisors for the opportunity to speak to this item tonight. In a short time, you'll be voting on accepting this very significant grant. This will allow several very significant projects, years in the making, to provide roofs over many heads and build the recovery community, our recovery community. I want to thank you in advance for supporting this, including the Recovery Solutions Project, the Covey Project, the Tiny Homes Project, supporting Habitat for Humanity, home building, and the day-by-day year-round shelter. They have all worked very hard on this. Working together, I am proud of this community, the county staff, the city staff, on these labor-intensive grants and partners who are doing the work we have asked them to do. This is all in support of building community benefits to fill very difficult housing gaps that have been needed for years. The Common Council, the Oshkosh Common Council, had directed our city manager to work on ending homelessness in Oshkosh. And while the city also applied for this neighborhood grant and we didn't receive ours, I was extremely happy to hear the county was awarded. Again, I am confident your votes tonight will leave a legacy and continue to bring these much needed partners the ability to stitch together a strong fabric of collaborative community caring for one another in this effort to fill that homeless continuum gap in Winnebago County. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments this evening. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak this evening? Please go ahead. You could state your name and address for the record, please. I see Mayor Crawford. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Dean Crawford, City of Neenah, 1360 Alpine Lane, City of Neenah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to stop by. I just looked at my countdown clock. It's at 20 days, 21 hours, 54 minutes and 42 seconds. So not that I'm counting, but as I prepare to leave office here, I wanted to say hello and also goodbye, but I'm sure our paths will cross with many of you. But I've had the wonderful honor of serving this community for 8 years now as the mayor of Neenah. I've gotten to work with your chairman, Shiloh, for some time during that period. And I've also had the distinguished honor of serving as a state legislator for 24 years. So, and a councilman before that. So over half my life has been given to public service. I've enjoyed every minute of it. It's been an honor. But, you know, we have, I want to say thank you to the county. I've had a great working relationship with former county exec Harris and Mr. Damel now. Your departments heads, whenever we've needed it, assistance here in the city of Neenah, have been responsive and professional. We've done some great things in a collaborative environment, and I'm sure that those types of things will continue. You know, as a county, you've been there to help us in many ways. The last 2 years during the pandemic, the health department, as you know, health department is part of, does it for the city of Neenah. So it's been a challenge for all of us, and there is no right answer many times, but we appreciate the support that we've had. So we've accomplished many good things. Great things have happened in this county through the work leadership of a lot of county board members and city councilmen and state legislators. Government and politics has changed since 1990, since I first came into office and been a member of the majority party, the minority party. Politics has become much more divisive, but I'm pleased to say that here, at least here in Neenah, we respect each other. We have dignity. We have our moments where we, argue about things or talk about things, but at the end of the day, I think we're all here for the same purpose, and that's to help our residents that we serve. So thank you all for being great colleagues. Thank you for what you do for the county of Winnebago here in this great state of Wisconsin. And I wish you all the very best, and I'll be around, not going anywhere. I'm going to be a lifelong Neenah guy and still going to stay around, but I wish you the very best. And thank you all for your service, because what you do really does make a difference. So thanks a lot for everything and listening to me.
Thank you. And thank you for your comments, and certainly thank you for all your work. And I certainly enjoyed working with you on the city council when I was involved in NENA. Always appreciated. And your comments are very accurate. There were disagreements at different times, but we all came together and recognized it was for the better of our community. And it was obvious that you always had that sentiment in mind. So thanks again, and congratulations on a certainly well-deserved retirement, Mayor Coughlin. Next, I'll call on Matt Muggerower. And I apologize, sir, if I mispronounce your name, but if you could please go ahead and state your name and address for the record, please.
No problem. Matt Mugerower, 1701 Bernheim Street in Oshkosh.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and County Board, and thank you for the time to speak this evening. First, a thank you to our current board members. Whether this is your last meeting as a county supervisor or you're continuing to serve after next week's election, thank you for your service to the community, for your efforts to trying to make this place that we call home a better place. I can attest through my role here in Oshkosh, it's about improving our community and moving us all forward. Before you this evening is a resolution accepting the state neighborhood improvement grants totaling just over $10 million. That can do just that. It can move us forward and help improve the lives of so many who call Winnebago County home. Less than a year ago, the Winnebago Housing Coalition published their 21 Homeless Continuum Report in collaboration with the Oshkosh and Winnebago County Housing Authority and the Oshkosh Area Community Foundation. And the biggest recommendation out of the Community Foundation supported report was Day by Day warming shelter, developing a year-round permanent facility that supports the needs of this community, of our community. And I'll quote right directly from that report. Day by Day's status and impact potential has shifted from what started out as an ambitious pursuit of a dedicated individual in our community and has grown into a foundational organization. Now is the time for their physical status to match their importance. No matter where Day by Day builds or rebuilds, the funds granted by the state will be needed. Whether you're for or against any location, it doesn't matter. These funds are still much needed, and they can only be used for this very important project. You, the county board, can help close one of the biggest gaps identified in that report. So now please don't let me only speaking about Day by Day let you think that any of the other projects are any less important. In their own way, each project is important. It can help move the needle on improving the lives of all that call Winnebago County home. You have the ability tonight to help impact the lives of so many people. I urge you to vote yes and accept the full grant awarded. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments this evening. I'll open it up. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak this evening? If so, please go ahead and raise your Zoom hand. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak this evening? I'll ask one more time. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak? If so, please go ahead and raise your Zoom hand. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that portion of the agenda. We'll move on to the next item, which is reports from committees, commissions, and boards. Any reports from any committees, commissions, and boards from any county board supervisor? If so, go ahead and raise your Zoom hand. Please go ahead, Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I took the opportunity today to watch the live stream of the U.S. Senate Armed Forces or Veterans Affairs Committee. And it was the very first hearing on the Honoring Our Pact Act. And I was very heartened by the apparent bipartisan support for this bill, as well as the willingness on both sides of the aisle to work toward a common agreement. And it was stated point blank that if we can afford to send our young men and women off to battle, we better find a way to support them when they get home. And especially in this time of the toxic burn pits and et cetera, that is specifically covered by the PACT Act. So I'll continue to monitor those proceedings, and after I am no longer a board member, I might just show up and speak as a member of the public. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Supervisor Snyder. Are there any other reports from any committees, commissions, and boards from any county board supervisor? If so, go ahead and raise your Zoom hand. Please go ahead, Supervisor Konecki. Certainly. I'll go ahead and step away so Supervisor Konecki can give it up.
Can you hear me? Okay, I'm retiring now from the county board after 14 years. I have to say something because I met so many great people, fun people, and very knowledgeable. You talked Dean Albright, Chairman Shiloh, Mary Ann Mueller here, Sue Ripper here, all you people, and I'm sure I'm going to miss some of you. I served on a committee with you, Mary Ann, Mary Beth. I mixed up there a little bit. But anyway, what a blessing it's been to be on this committee and represent my district in Menasha. And I think I've grown for this opportunity. I was very nervous when I first started. I think I got better. I didn't say a whole lot at the meetings, but on my committees, they couldn't shut me up. I thought I was on board. I had to be because when there was an oral vote, I had to say the first vote. I couldn't follow, which I wouldn't do anyways. But it's been a wonderful opportunity for me. And I hope my constituents through the years thought I did. I think I did. And I'm sure I'm missing something, but I thought I had to say something because I really enjoyed my time on the Winnebago County Board. Thank you.
Thank you certainly for those comments, Supervisor Konecki. I'll next call on Supervisor Norton. Please go ahead, Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to announce and state that the ADRC had their own housing study, especially concerned with senior housing, and that was completed on March 14th. We had a presentation, some very interesting dire numbers looking toward the future about having senior housing available. They do and are planning on having 2 or 3 public presentations. I know one's going to be up in the Indian area. As soon as I get them, Mr. Chairman, from Beth Roberts and confirm, I would hope everyone would be able to maybe attend those or look at the online presentation, because it's very, the study just solidified some of what I felt is that how senior housing is going to be a major crisis in the next coming decade or so in this county. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next, I'll call on Supervisor Defferting. Please go ahead, Supervisor Defferting. Please, go right ahead. I will step aside for Supervisor Defferting.
Avoid the reverb here. All righty. Everyone hear me? All right, so the Safe Streets Committee met a couple weeks ago, and there was a short presentation done by Michael Rust, who is the Executive Director of the Winnebago Conflict Resolution Center. The Winnebago Conflict Resolution Center is a nonprofit organization that's been in existence for about 30 years now, and they have been handling a lot of small claims cases, as well as divorce proceedings, child custody cases, But they're also dabbled a little bit into restorative justice courts. And restorative justice courts is essentially, it's an old idea, but it's a new idea for us. It's an idea that the indigenous had back in the day before colonization, and it's how they handled criminal justice, where the victims and the victims' families and the assailant or the culprit directly meet and figure out what they can do to resolve the issue. And Outagamie County right now has been exploring this. They have been talking about this at their Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. There's a restorative justice center over in St. Croix Valley that has been in existence for 20 years. And there's a restorative justice resource in Marquette. And the executive director, Michael Rust, his friend, has just recently started heading that project down there in Marquette. So this is something that has been kind of a blooming idea nationwide. And the one thing that's worth noting is that there could be a huge cost savings for the county each case if we decide to proceed with restorative justice rather than traditional criminal justice court proceedings. We're looking at a savings anywhere between $5,000 to $15,000 per case. So if you think about if there are 10 cases that seem to match that criteria, and the DA decides to proceed with it, we could start seeing a big savings for the county going forward. So this is just a topic of discussion that that I certainly think that any future supervisor that will be joining us in April will be thinking about. This is something that that I invite people to come in and bring in their opinions, to have an open discussion about this, and I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. Are there any other reports from any committees, commissions, and boards from any county board supervisor? Any other reports? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that portion of the agenda. We'll move on to the next item, which
Looks
is
like Chairman Ramos, looks like Jerry wants to say, Supervisor Finch wants to say something.
I apologize. So before we go to county executive's report, we'll open up the mic for Supervisor Finch. Please go ahead, Supervisor Finch. And if you could open up the mic on your end, Supervisor Finch.
You're muted, Jerry.
We'll give an opportunity for Supervisor
There we are.
Finch. Very good. We can hear you now.
Okay, good. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. You have made my career on the county board a fantastic thing. I've got to learn from so many different people, so many ways to help our citizens from Winnebago County. And I truly hope that a lot of you stay on the board, because you've done a wonderful job for Winnebago County. I don't want to preach, but that's whatever. But anyway, I just want to say thank you and good luck to you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Certainly enjoyed working with you over these past 16 years as well. Very good. One last time, any other reports from any committees, commissions, or boards from any county board supervisor? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is county executive's report. For that, I'll call on Executive Damel.
Thank you, Chairman Ramos. I'd like to start by taking the time to acknowledge the life of Alan Biekel. Alan was serving in his 8th term as the Fond du Lac County Executive. He leaves a legacy of collaboration with Winnebago County in many ways. He's also a mentor of mine. We shared plenty of conversations over the last year, and I appreciate all the wisdom that he shared with me, and our friendship will be greatly missed. I also want to offer my condolences to the family of Tony Schwarmer, who passed away last Thursday. Tony was an employee of the county and worked for facilities over the last 5 years. He was well liked by his co-workers, and this tragic news was hard on all of us. We lost a member of our county family last Thursday. He will be sorely missed. I attended a gathering to remember his life earlier today, and I am proud of how our facilities team and other departments have come together during this difficult time. Tonight, you will be considering a grant which will drastically change the landscape of homelessness and housing instability in our county. As you heard in my presentation 2 weeks ago, this grant is the first step that provides an investment to tackle initiatives outlined in the Oshkosh Area Community Foundation's funded Winnebago Land Housing Coalition report. Winnebago County already uses substantial tax levy and other financial resources from multiple departments to support the organizations that will be our partners in this grant. Prior to receiving any grant money, each organization will sign agreements with the county to ensure adequate sustainability plans in compliance with the grant. Most of the grant funds will be spent on one-time capital projects with nothing that will create undue burden on future county budgets. Andy Phillips has been contracted as Winnebago County's legal counsel for distributing these funds. When it comes to local government and public purpose projects, he and his teams are the foremost legal mind in the state, will ensure that all contracts will follow the letter of the law and protect the county from liabilities going forward. Furthermore, these funds will be monitored by a grant coordinator. All projects and partners will be supervised with no way forward to independence. We find these segments of our population stuck in dependency. These programs funded through this grant are focused on improving the lives of those they touch, as well as these projects put forward by day Oshkosh kids and solutions recovery services all entail current circumstances. Covenants to prohibit them from being able to house themselves. Habitat for Humanity feels following up on the back end will be a resource to prevent our citizens from falling back into poverty. We must find ways to progress our citizens to the goal of independence while taking care of those who will never be able to achieve the independence on their own. Can people hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You are breaking up at times. We were actually, Corporation Counsel was about to come up to let you know that. But at times you are breaking up.
Well, I can, I believe Director Collard is on this, correct?
Director Collard?
Yes, I'm here. He was breaking up. I went to let him know that a minute ago. Can you hear me okay? Am I breaking up at all?
Yes, we can hear you well, Director Collard.
I'll have John move to my laptop.
Sure.
Very good. So we'll give an opportunity, Executive Damos, so you can move to that laptop.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well now. So certainly feel whatever you need to say from your report. Some of it, I will tell you intermittently was breaking up as you're speaking.
Well, okay. I guess I'll start with the report with the grant portion. So I'll start over from there if that's okay with you.
And I think that makes good sense because we were able to hear you well when you were speaking about Executive Biekel from Final Election. We were able to hear up through that and as you began to speak about the grant. So I think that.
Okay. All right, I apologize for that. Tonight, you will consider accepting a grant which will drastically change the landscape of homelessness and housing instability in our county. As you heard in my presentation 2 weeks ago, this grant was the first step that provides an investment to tackle initiatives outlined in the Oshkosh Area Community Foundation funded Winnebago Land Housing Coalition report. Winnebago County already uses substantial tax levy and other financial resources for multiple departments to support the organizations that will be our partners in this grant. Prior to receiving any grant money, each organization will sign agreements with the county to ensure adequate sustainability plans and compliance with the grant. Most of the grant funds will be spent on one-time capital projects with nothing that will create an undue burden on future county budgets. Andy Phillips has been contracted as Winnebago County's legal counsel for distributing these funds. When it comes to local government and public purpose projects, he and his team are the foremost legal minds in the state. He will ensure that all contracts will follow the letter of the law and protect the county from liabilities going forward. Furthermore, these funds will be monitored by a grant coordinator. All projects and partners will be supervised by this person to ensure continued collaboration as well as follow through on required reporting for the ARPA funds. We will be working with these nonprofits to ensure sustainability of their success and intend to be there as a resource for them going forward. For a long time, government has created resources for those who live in poverty with no way forward to independence. We find these segments of our population stuck in dependency. The programs funded through this grant are focused on improving the lives of those they touch, as well as housing those who may never be able to support themselves. The projects put forward by Day Oshkosh Kids and Solutions Recovery Service will all entail robust programming to address the issue that led these citizens to their current circumstances. Covey will provide adult family housing for those with cognitive disabilities that prohibit them from being able to house themselves. It will give them a resource and dignity they deserve. Habitat for Humanity fills permanent housing for those who reach the ultimate goal of home ownership. Following up on the back end will be a resource to prevent our citizens from falling back into poverty. We must find ways to progress our citizens to the goal of independence while taking care of those who will never be able to achieve independence on their own. I am hopeful that this will not only be passed, but passed unanimously tonight. In the spirit of transparency, I do want to acknowledge the fact that I have previously served on both the Day and Oshkosh Kid Foundation boards. However, these two partners and projects were picked as the two capital projects listed in priority for the Winnebago Land Housing Coalition study funded by the Oshkosh Area Community Foundation. We can build the model that can bring the meekest among us to a place of strength. We have the ability to meet our most vulnerable people where they are and give them a hand up. We have the ability to tell our community partners that we will be here with you to help solve the issues facing our communities together. Alone, we will continue to struggle. Together and coordinated, we can move a mountain. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Damel. Very good. That'll complete his report. We'll move to the next item, which is County Board Chairman's report. So just a couple things. A reminder to everyone, as I mentioned at the prior meeting on March 15th, outside of the fact that we're having this meeting this evening, the next scheduled County Board meeting would be the April 19th organizational meeting. So that would be the first meeting for the newly elected county board. I did mention at the last meeting, so everyone was aware, that the intent would be an in-person only meeting. So that would really be the first one like that, frankly, in about 2 years. So I guess I wanted to remind folks of that one more time. And then I also kind of wanted to give everyone just a little background as to how we got where we're at today, because of course we are here under unique circumstances. So some of this was already reviewed by Executive Damel at the prior meeting, but I thought it'd be helpful for everyone to nonetheless hear it, so we're all on the same page as to the evolution of how we got here. So as Executive Damel said on the March 15th meeting, there was an announcement that Winnebago County was awarded this grant funding as of, I believe it was March 3rd. And so when you look at March 3rd, that was actually the Thursday right prior to the Tuesday when we would otherwise normally publish our agenda, because we publish our agenda for these county board meetings a week in advance. And I was apprised at that time already of some of the time sensitiveness of this grant and some of these projects. And so what I asked and the county executive and I talked, was that there be a presentation to apprise the county board and the public of this grant and the individual projects. And the county executive was very willing and agreed with that approach. I also thought it was in spirit to one of our county board rules, even though it's technically not within it, I felt it was within the spirit of it, where anything where there's $50,000 for a capital project, it comes to the board for a presentation at least one meeting prior to the board. Once again, that's more in the spirit, but given the size of the grant and the scope, I thought there was value in doing that, and both the county executive and I had talked about that. Of course, I knew that that was, however, the only county board meeting that was scheduled for this 2-year term of the county board. And I had also said to individuals that I would be open to the possibility of another county board meeting in between that March 15th meeting and to when the next board would first be seated, which would be at the earliest, April 19th. And that actually is only an organizational meeting typically, not the business meeting that would normally occur on April 26th. So I had apprised a number of individuals that if there was confidence in the time sensitiveness of this and the benefit of it, I would be open to that possibility. And I told them the possibility of March 29th or potentially April 5th, but understandably April 5th has its challenges because, of course, as we all know, it's an election day. So what some of you may know is we do have a county board rule, however, and that county board rule is based on state statutes, actually. It is actually the very last county board rule in our rule book, and it's rule 25.0, and it references state statute. And basically what it says is there can be a special session of the county board, but one of the requirements of that is that there's a petition by a majority of the county board members with the date and time for that special session and the reason why. So that did occur and was signed by the majority of the county board members. Please understand that some of those individuals who signed that weren't necessarily all co-sponsors of this resolution, but they absolutely felt that there was value in this county board giving consideration to this versus waiting at least a month for the next board to take its seat. And so that's really why the evolution of how we got to where we are today. And so before we move to that resolution, I guess I would want to point out one thought about the resolution in general, because this question has come up to me in various forms quite a bit over the last week or two. And I guess I would want the board and the public to understand what we are actually considering now tonight is accepting the funds. What we're actually doing is accepting the grant from the fund, and then we're allocating it to those different organizations in the community. However, we are not doing anything related to a location related to any of these projects. We're not doing anything related to specific planning with any of these projects or zoning or sustainability even though there'll be agency agreements, it will be up to those individual organizations ultimately and their boards to determine how they will go about those different things. We tonight are simply deciding whether we want to accept that $10.35 million from the state and then allocate it to those organizations. That's really what we'll be debating tonight. And in many respects, we've done that before with many other grants in the past. Some terms are used as pass-through grants. You've heard those different terms. In many ways, we as the county are the fiscal agent for this grant. So that's really what we are debating here tonight, whether we want to accept these grants and then to allocate them to those different organizations. So with that, I guess I'll open up for any questions to me before we move on to the actual resolution. No? Okay, very good. So we'll move on to the resolution. That's resolution number 30303-2022 to accept the Neighborhood Improvement Grant Fund of $10,351,686.15 awarded to Winnebago County and effect a budget transfer. I'll call on Supervisor Lautenschlager for a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I seek the approval of resolution 303-032022.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve resolution number 303-03-2022. We'll now open it up for any discussion. I'll first call on Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Borchert, I believe. Please go ahead, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I read and reread tonight's resolution, I remembered an old story I once heard about a man who found himself adrift in the sea. He swam valiantly and he tread water until he had no strength left. And as he was going down for the third time and he knew he was about to die, he spotted a ship and waved and shouted frantically for help. The crewman on the ship saw him and yelled back, "Get yourself a boat." Too often when we look at the disenfranchised in our community or at the homeless and those with food or shelter insecurities, we ask them to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. But if we were merely to glance down at their feet, we'd see that they were barefoot. There are no straps. There are no boots. This resolution will not solve the homeless issue in our community, but it will make a difference for all, for at least 300 people a year, possibly as high as 500 people. It's not perfect, but it's an opportunity to make a difference for those who need us. We will not see an opportunity like this again in our lifetime. If you want perfect, you'll have to find yourself Aladdin's lamp or seek help from Santa Claus. We've read emails from residents who have wondered or worried about the burden this housing initiative may place on us later. Yes, poor people are a burden, but their burdens are our opportunity to make a difference in their lives. This isn't just tattered men and ragged women, but this is babies and children too who need housing. My sincere hope tonight is that we listen to each other, have our say both for and against the resolution. We listen politely. And then my greatest wish is that we come together and vote unanimously to accept this grant, even knowing it's not perfect. Please don't vote no. Please don't abstain from voting. Make this unanimous vote for the final legacy of the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors 2020-22 session. On the eve of the election of a new board, a legacy which shows our state and our nation that we all stood as one and voted to help our citizens who have nothing, to have something to give them the hand up they desperately need. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker is Supervisor Borchert, followed by Supervisor Nussbaum. Please go ahead, Supervisor Borchert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be supporting this resolution this evening, but there's one thing that I do have a concern about is that I look at it and I represent the people of Menasha, 3rd District, and I see a lot of Oshkosh being brought out in it. I'm happy to say that one of them, I think, had Omro and Winneconne in it. And I look at this as an opportunity that the Oshkosh area is getting their dose of financial backing, and so be it. But I certainly hope the board looks ahead a little bit and takes this into consideration when the rest of the money comes in and it's applied. The peanut butter is applied a little bit more liberally to all of the bread. That is my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Borchert. And I appreciate that new line. I'll certainly use it in the future. Next speaker is Supervisor Nussbaum, followed by Supervisor Wingren. Please go ahead, Supervisor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm planning on voting for this, but I'm I might regret it later. If it weren't for the portions that promise to enable people to get back on their feet, I'd vote no. I'm all in favor of helping people. However, there are several things wrong with this. I don't like the fact that the grant is being used as a campaign stunt before the election for governor. Evers handed us an enormous check with his name being the most prominent part of the check. Buying votes using the people's money is wrong. Haven't we learned that throwing more money at problems just creates more problems? That's how we got in this mess. It's a vicious cycle. The bigger the government gets, the more dependent on the government the people become. In order to have more control, the government strives to get more and more people dependent on them. Then the problems keep getting worse, so they throw more money out there, and so on and so on. If the root cause doesn't get fixed, things will never get better. ARPA is a big scam. The biggest single con ever attempted. This is how these scams work. You start with a crisis, either natural or man-made. You do everything in your power to convince the people that you have the solution. You make it easier for them to swallow by giving them little bribes. Just a portion going back to the people that you plan on taking the money from. Congress then passes the bill to take the people's money. Much of that money goes to special interests who funnel it back to the politicians who passed the law. That's money laundering. Some of the money goes back to the local government, but the federal government mandates what you can and cannot do. It's just another way of the federal government to control local government. The more they can centralize the power, the more control they have over the people. Our system was built from the bottom up, but the people on the top want to control everything from the top down. That's what they are doing, and we are letting them, all for false security. Then after all this, we the people have to pay back our own money that was taken away with interest through taxes. I'm probably going to vote for this, and I sure hope I don't regret it later. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Nussbaum. Next speaker is Supervisor Wingren, followed by Supervisor Defferting. Please go ahead, Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For all of us, this is the last meeting of this session of the board. For many of us, like me, after 24 years, this is our last meeting ever. I'm a member of this board. What a great honor and blessing it is to be here tonight and to end this session with hopefully hope and an end to cynicism. It's a blessing to be able to help people who need help. For that's what government is all about, in my opinion. That's what it has been for 24 years. Tonight, we are at the dawn of a new day, a day of opportunity. What a once in a lifetime opportunity we have to help people. We have a chance to significantly change the quality of life for some that need it so much. When I was a teacher, I used to talk to my kids, my leadership, a motto: 10 words, each word, 2 letters. 10 words, each word, only 2 letters. If it is to be, it is up to me. Tonight, if it is to be, it is up to me. We'll change it. It's up to us. It's up to us to vote yes on this, hopefully unanimously. Let's get the cynicism out of the word, out of this room. Let's be a leader. We have tonight, I think, an historic opportunity with this particular board to end this term on a good note. An era of cooperation is about to begin, hopefully, between this executive and this county board. I applaud County Executive Damon and his staff for writing this grant, for getting this money, and for bringing all sorts of disparate views together to culminate this evening at this historic juncture. It's a blessing and an opportunity tonight. Thank you all for being part of good government tonight. Let's bring that ball home. This was a great chance to do good. Someone less than us will say, you done good tonight. You done good. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren. Next speaker is Supervisor Defferting, followed by Supervisor Binder. Please go ahead, Supervisor Defferting. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of echo the sentiments of Supervisor Nussbaum here. I hate the situation that I feel like we are all being put in. I do intend to vote yes on this, but it's a very, very reluctant yes. I spoke with Executive Director, day-by-day Executive Director Schutz yesterday over the phone, and she was very. She told me about the number of people that have become homeless over the last couple of years, and we have to keep in mind that it wasn't necessarily just the COVID pandemic, but it was also the Safer at Home order too. The Safer at Home order has essentially basically vanished millions of dreams and millions of opportunities. Just completely, the door has been shut on them. And people have lost their jobs. People have lost their businesses. They have lost their livelihoods. We went through massive supply chain shocks because of that. And the pandemic was just like this giant earthquake at the Marianas Trench, and we're now seeing the tsunami of the first wave of the tsunami that's happening. And so we're seeing an increase in homelessness. We're seeing an increase in an increase in rent too, and just the cost of living through by way of inflation. It's very much that whole adage of government just breaking your legs and then handing you a crutch and saying, if I wasn't there, look where you would be. And that's what I feel like the situation that we're being put in right now. Obviously, we want to make sure that people are facing that they are getting housing, that we're finding a roof over their heads, and that we want to help them out. And I believe that we do have a very strong community that will jump in, and we can actually accomplish this. But I sincerely hope that this is not something where 20 years from now, they come back to the county and say, well, we got $10 million from through the state, by way of the county through this grant, we need another 10 million, or this could, by way of inflation, turn into 20 million. I know that I've aired my concerns with Executive Damel on this. I do not want this to turn into something where we either have to face borrowing money again 20 years from now, raising taxes just to pay for the existing expenses on the county budget. I want to make sure that this is something that is sustainable, so that 20 years from now, none of these organizations need to come back to the county again and say we need more money. Executive Damel is aware of this, and I know that there's a couple of people that are involved in this that are aware of this too. So I just want to make sure that this is something that will be sustainable for the county in the next 20 or 30 years. I just don't want us to kind of kick this can down the road infinity. So, but I will be voting yes tonight. Again, it's a reluctant yes, but I will be voting yes.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. Next speaker is Supervisor Binder, followed by Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Binder.
I too will be voting yes on this. I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and thinks my goal today is I want to become homeless. We all take pride in our family and we want our kids to get a good education, and we want them to do better than what we have. It's hard times and circumstances that cause people to be homeless. It's not that they want to be. You know, some people have illnesses. Some people, you know, they just can't deal with the stress of life, and they had a good life, and maybe they got divorced and things didn't turn out the way they wanted. We need to give them a second chance in life. And that's what we do. We treat people the way we want people to treat us. We have to reach out to them. Can you imagine trying to find a job when you're homeless? You fill out a job application. Where do I live? Don't have an address. How do I contact you? I don't have a phone. You know, I work for the highway department, and we'd clean out the Main Street Bridge once a year. And we had to take all their belongings and haul them to the dump. You know, I've never felt so basically bad in my whole life, taking everybody's position. Just imagine you going home tonight and somebody went and took everything out of your house. Now you have nothing. And that's all they had. They had no place to live. They looked for a dry shelter. You know, we have a humane society. We're forecasted to get 1.5 inches of rain. You know, we see a stray dog or a cat, and we want to get them into shelter. Yet we see a human being and we just think, well, they'll find some place to go. It's time for us to step up and do the right thing and take care of these people so they have a second chance in life, and hopefully they succeed and live a life like we live. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Binder. Next speaker is Supervisor Shorsey, followed by Supervisor Stafford. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I find it interesting that none of my colleagues have asked why this wasn't run through the Finance and Personnel Committee, since we're talking about $10 million. That's rather interesting to me. But Karen, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I am going to be abstaining on this this resolution this evening, my final act. And there are a couple of reasons personally that I have. One is that there was no internal process for county board review, questions, or buy-in on the project. Some of us were aware that there was some discussions going on, there was some grant writing being done, but never has this been processed through the board. So when we finally received the grant, that we would know what we are getting into. And it's another example of the dysfunction we've been experiencing for for 9 months now, almost a year. And so that's number one. Number two is there's a rather important issue with the day-by-day shelter about the location and how it relates to the plans of the city of Oshkosh to develop the downtown area. And I actually was going to consider a motion to stipulate that be resolved before any money be released. There should be an agreement on an appropriate location that involves our key downtown development stakeholders. A lot of people, both private and organization funding, have gone into our plans and the development of what we have in place so far. And the shelter definitely will have an impact on that if it's located in their first choice location. I also think there needs to be in the language of the funding that it be limited to Winnebago County residents. I read in one of the publications that someone thought it was a good idea just to be available to everyone. Well, this is something that is being supported by Winnebago County taxpayers and other sources of income from our county, and the residents we serve and who we are obligated to serve are Winnebago County residents. And anyone coming in that is not a Winnebago County should have either public or private funding attached to them, similar to what we do in the jail. And then my fourth issue is lack of clarity. And again, this ties with number one, in that there was absolutely no internal process for presenting this very significant concept of programming and the county's lead role in it. And I find it very offensive to the county board that this was not done. So just a lack of clarity regarding county liability, our responsibility, budget impacts, and legal agreements. On every other thing, we consider that where we're creating legal agreements with other parties, we see copies of those legal agreements. They're reviewed by our offices, our counsel, and we know what we're getting into. And that is my biggest concern. And then why now? Why does it have to move so quickly? And what I understand is that because shovels are ready to go in the ground. Well, that's frankly not our problem. That what's most important is the process that we used when we're accepting this responsibility, this $10 million responsibility. So for those reasons, I will be abstaining this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker is Supervisor Stafford. Please go ahead, Supervisor Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Perfect. I as well will be supporting this, but I do want to just echo a few things because I am supporting it with some level of reservation. You know, I think the first thing is, I think every supervisor here can say that we want to help people. And I've heard, you know, a few people say, you know, I want to help, that's why I'm doing this. I think everyone wants to help. That's why we're doing what we're doing. I mean, seriously, why else would we be doing this? But there are a couple of things that Supervisors Nussbaum, Defferting, and Shorsey said that I think deserve some reflection, at the very least, some reflection. And that is, I sure hope that this does help people, both now and in the future. Inflation's a real thing. And inflation is too much dollars going after too few goods. And that's what inflation is. And inflation hurts the people who we're trying to help here. And by spending and continuing to spend money that's been produced, we do impact inflation. We have to recognize that. We have to recognize what our actions in spending this money will, to some degree, impact inflation, which will impact the same people that we're trying to help. And I think there's some, there has to be some thought around that. The other was around what Supervisor Defferting said, and that is sustainability. I hope that there's some thought what it's going to take. I know that we're giving this money to individual non-for-profits, and they'll be doing this work, which is great. But we should make sure that they have the infrastructures in place to support this. Because there's nothing worse, I'll tell you, there is nothing worse to putting this up there and helping people and being that beacon and then having to take it away or having to hear horror stories of things not working the way they should be because they didn't have the money for upkeep and whatnot. So I sure hope that we think about that and think about those implications, because the last thing that I think anyone wants to see is someone struggle because of actions that we took today. And the last, and I got to say, I loved the word that Supervisor Shorsey said, responsibility. And I think this is a responsibility that we have to take with a heavy heart and with much consideration. So when we all vote, and I think most of us are going to be voting yes, I think we have to think about what that responsibility is today and in the future. And I do share the same frustration that I wish there was more time for review and more clarification and clarity, since this is such a large amount of money. And we need to make sure that as supervisors that this money is going to the good that we're hoping that it's going to. And I hope that and I'm very, very pleased to hear, especially being reiterated with county executive, that we're going to have people in place at the ground level to make sure that this is spent wisely. But I sure hope in the next term, that in the next session, that we look at this and we continue to make sure that this money is being spent appropriately and it is ultimately helping people. And that we're being good stewards of taxpayer money, regardless of where that money is coming from. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Stafford. Next speaker is Supervisor Rasmussen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was brought up that it hadn't come to PNF, and I wanted to explain a few reasons why and some other things. I got a lot of notes here, so please bear with me as I muddle through this. Starts with the March 15th meeting when we had the presentation by the county exec and a dozen or so others, whatever it was. And I found it a little odd that we never were able to ask any questions. I had a lot of them. None of them were answered in the presentation. I've never seen a presentation like that we didn't get to ask questions. I understand the county exec called probably everybody, I don't know, and asked questions. Why wouldn't our questions that we have be heard by the whole board? It just threw up a big red flag for me. On the 18th, the county exec did call me and, asked if I had any concerns. I had a couple. And asked me about having a PNF meeting. And I said, well, we have one scheduled for April 7th. And he wanted me to have a separate one, a special one. I said, this hasn't gone through any committee of jurisdiction that I know of. I haven't seen anything. I believe this would go through HS, the Human Services Committee, has to come from somebody. And they hadn't met yet. And I told him I would discuss this with the board chairman, which I did that weekend. He agreed it should go to HS first. And he also told me that he would be calling this special board meeting, even if PNF didn't meet, because I wasn't sure how this was all going to fit into this. Again, why the hurry up? And I was told also that it was to probably get a better contractor, or as was stated, that this would be shovel ready. Shovel ready means shovel ready. I questioned about, well, we have a tiny house community. And before I go any farther, I want to just say that don't construe my comments to mean anything here against helping people that are homeless. I wish the homeless situation totally would go away. And I just want to make sure that this happens. A tiny house community. Where's it going to be? I haven't seen anything. Planning and zoning, I asked Tom Egan when I saw him, has there been anything through planning and zoning about a tiny house community? Nope, nothing with the county. Must be in the city. So I talked to the city manager. Yes, it's in the city, the land that they have. But it hasn't gone through much of a process. It's been to their planning commission, but nothing has been approved. And it made me think back of about 3 years ago when out here in our township, we had a zoning change for a development, and we had a part of it that was going to be zoned to accept duplexes. And I took 6 months of heat for that, including from this board, when it came to the board, hammering on me because we were going to allow some duplexes in a development. But yet we're ready to go ahead and approve a tiny house community, and we don't even know where it is. And it hasn't gone through that process yet. The HS committee was called, or the meeting was called for last Tuesday, 4 o'clock. But I noticed that the agenda for this meeting was posted before that meeting was even over with. So I thought, well, what do we need a PNF meeting for? I'm not sure. We got no memo, no budget transfer, nothing, no information. In the meantime, the next few days, I talked to a few people that are knowledgeable about this. I received a lot of facts and opinions and feedback of what was going to happen. The day-by-day shelter that's proposed, I know that's up in the air yet as far as the location. So we're approving this and we don't even know where it's going to be. We're getting this money. I don't know how you can spin it in any other way other than the fact that these will be our buildings. Our budget transfer here is operating grants for 400,000, land for 1.6 million, general construction for 7 million. That's in our budget transfer. That doesn't look like pass-through to me. We have $828,000 in county labor costs for 23 and 24. that doesn't seem like pass through to me. This is going to be our buildings, folks. I think most of the people on this board remember when we talked about 8, 10 years, whatever it was, to build the airport building, the scrutiny that was involved. And here we're about to accept and approve, these will be our buildings, $7 million worth of construction. We don't even know where it is yet. And what I'm talking about here is the process, I did speak with some of the PNF members about the way what has happened here. Let me back up a little bit here yet. Talking about the building. I guess a question would be to the facilities committee chairman, has this come to your committee at all? Has the facilities director even looked at this stuff? We have no idea what any of this even looks like. Shovel ready. It doesn't seem like any of this is shovel ready yet. Anyways, some of the members on the PNF committee I talked to, and they just said, you know, what we have to say, we need to say to the whole board, and let's just forego that, because by the time I got the budget transfer, it was already Friday night before the meeting, and there just was no time anymore. So that's why we didn't have a PNF meeting for this. I still think this is very premature. I do not believe this is shovel ready. There's too many questions in my mind. I see a lot of money going to worthy organizations, but I haven't seen a plan yet as exactly what is the plan for getting these people back on their feet, getting them functioning in society, other than we're putting them in a building. That doesn't seem to be working. I talked with a landscape contractor today. A bunch of them are going out of business. They can't find workers. There's a prominent restaurant in town. I won't say what it is, but I heard they're going out of business because they can't find workers. I know that we had received an email today that said about 60% of the homeless people have drug issues, mental issues, things like that. And I'm sure that's an accurate number, and that's, those people do need help. What about the other 40%? That's the ones that I'm concerned about. Why aren't they just moving on? You know, I don't get it. That's my concerns about this. I think the process is way ahead of itself. I don't think we have enough answers. I don't have enough answers. Again, don't take any of my comments to mean that I'm not concerned about the homeless situation. I certainly am. I don't want to see that for anybody. And I think they need help, and I think we need to do it the right way. And I just don't see that. I see this as throwing $10 million at something. It's federal money, and that's what the federal government does. They just throw money at stuff and wash their hands of it and walk away. So because of the process here, and I think it's premature, I'll be abstaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Please go ahead, Supervisor Gabbard.
I wasn't going to speak tonight, but I thought I'd be the only one tending to lean toward a no vote. But I did my research, and I've had many emails and conversations with Executive Damo. My biggest fear is we're going to do all this work. I understand the day-by-day warming shelter will not be owned by the county, nor will the tiny villages. I asked about maintenance. It's not going to be ours. To give you a heads up, the warming shelter's out for bids on April 14th. So it's pretty much shovel ready. And they're planning on going to the site that they got approved on CP and Broad. What my biggest fear is that we aren't going to help the people get out of their situation. Homelessness has been suffered by many people. When I was a kid growing up, I had a single parent. We never knew when food would be on the table, where we'd live. My mother went out and got 3 jobs. There seems to be a disconnect. There are jobs ready for people. And you say, well, they have mental problems. They need to have a few years to figure this all out. I can't see an end result that these people, whether they're single people, families will have an end result. This is a feel-good thing. This is to make you feel good that you did something. We don't want homeless people. We want people to get back on their feet. But I have not seen enough information nor heard it that tells me there is a plan. We can have all the schooling, how to cook, how to go get a job, but there's no guarantee that we'll get these people back into society. No one wants to be homeless. No one wants to be without work, but we keep helping people with all these programs and there's no end game here. So I do believe this is a feel-good project. I do believe it was processed improperly. I agree with some of the supervisors that have spoke on it. I am going to vote for this tonight. I have been a no vote until this morning, and then I decided that I would vote for this. Nothing to do with the politics, nothing to do with the election. I am hoping the people that are in charge of the day-by-day warming shelter, the tiny homes, the recovery solutions, that they put forth the best effort they can to make this a success. You can put people in these facilities, but the end result has to be get them back in society. They're working people, make them proud of what they did. You can help people, but they have to help themselves. So I thought I'd be the only vote knowing tonight, but I will vote for this. Many reservations. So I'm hoping the players involved do their due diligence and make this a successful gig that we're about to vote on. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gabbard. Next speaker is Supervisor Zelmer, followed by Supervisor Hinz. Please go ahead, Supervisor Zelmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question and then an observation to make. Of the 6 proposals and the dollar amount, who came up with the dollar amount? Was it someone from the county, or was it each of these entities came up with it and then submitted it?
I'll go ahead and call on Executive Damo or Human Services Director Topol to answer that question. Executive Damo?
I'm seeming to have some computer issues. Can I defer this to Director Topol or
certainly,
or Ashley?
Director Topol, can you answer his question?
It's my understanding, can you hear me all right, first of all?
Yes, we can hear you well.
It's my understanding that that each of the projects themselves had all of these things in place already, so they had determined the amounts that they would need to in order to enact these particular parts of the project. So there wasn't anybody else coming in over the top to tell them how much to spend or not spend.
Thank you, Director Topol. Anything further, Supervisor Zelmer?
Yeah, I wish to me it's top heavy, and I wish that it would have been distributed a little more fairly, because all of these are good projects. So like Day by Day and the Habitat for Humanity, I think they're maybe getting a little high on what they want. However, I will vote yes for this, but it's not a solid yes because I don't think that things are being distributed as fair as they could. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Zelmer. Next speaker is Supervisor Hinz, followed by Supervisor Powers. Please go ahead, Supervisor Hinz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay. I'm not going to tread over a lot of the ground that some of the other supervisors have had. I mean, I have a lot of the same similar problems with some of these things, like Supervisor Stafford and Defferding and Nussbaum and Scorsese brought up. And also some of the other members, I'm not going to go through a roll call of everybody that I agree with and disagree with. But I'm going to bring in a little bit of a unique perspective, being that in January of this year, I stepped down as the chairman of the Oshkosh Plan Commission. So therefore, I've had a few of these groups before us and a few of these projects before us, either in workshop or things that we've actually voted on. And I just want to touch on these a little bit because it sounds like some people maybe weren't aware that we actually dealt with these things at the Plan Commission. As far as the day-by-day location, we actually voted on that. We had a hearing. We had a few people who came in who were concerned, and I actually, as the chairman at the time, I was looking at these people and I said to them, a lot of the complaints were about having these homeless people in your neighborhoods at night, finding syringes and, you know, all the odd hours of the day and whatnot. And the day-by-day warming shelter is actually going to take these people out of your community at night, because the day-by-day warming shelter locks its doors at 8 p.m. and doesn't open them until the next morning. The people are inside. And I know for the fact that that shelter, they're going to have staff on hand, because this is what was told to us. They're supposed to have staff on hand to help these people look for jobs during the day. And the reason the shelter, they want the upgraded shelter, not only for the increased bed space, but they can also have better showering facility for the people, better allow these people to have other personnel there to help them get back into the real world by finding employment and by helping them relocate when they do start getting some money. And that feeds right into the mini home project, which also came before us and it was unanimously creating excitement on the Oshkosh Plan Commission. And the fact that, and I may be speaking out of turn, but I know that they had some significant money behind them locally, and I don't want to name drop here because I don't want to be wrong and have it come back. But the mini homes were the next step. The mini homes were to allow people who were in that transitional state where they couldn't really afford to get into a home or apartment, but they were better off than most homeless people were. It was allowing them to move back into the community by starting out with a small home and having a place to call their own and a place to operate out of, and the base of operations, their own private bathroom and their own small living facilities. And a lot of the discussion has been about those two groups, and those two, as far as the Oshkosh Plan Commission goes, as of when I left in January, there was excitement for both of these projects within the City Plan Commission. And I also noticed that, and it wasn't until Supervisor Zellmer just mentioned it, the Habitat for Humanity money. I know it was brought up that there's no specifics about where anything's going to be or whatnot. Well, Habitat for Humanity has zero specifics. They build where they can. And we know they build, and they're a good nonprofit, and they help people in the community. But there weren't any questions about them. So if you're going to hold one or two of these to that standard, maybe you need to think about holding them all to this standard. Just asking those people where their questions are coming from. Is it that they're not for the project, or is it? And I'm not trying to start an argument on this. I'm just saying you have to think about that, because the Habitat for Humanity, they build in various locations. So I don't want to belabor the point. I just wanted to add a little bit of my insight, so that way some of the people who are on this board could hear some of what actually occurred with the City Plan Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Hinson. Thanks for some of that background. Next speaker is Supervisor Powers. Please go ahead, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't raise my hand for myself, but Supervisor Finch has tried waving his hand several times. So I raised mine. So I'm speaking for Jerry. He wants to speak.
Very good. So we'll have you cede the floor to Supervisor Finch. Please go ahead, Supervisor Finch. And if you could open up your mic, Supervisor Finch. Very good.
Good.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. The reason I wanted to talk is I want to make sure that this is for Winnebago County. I want everything to go good for Winnebago County. I don't want one thing just to go for a certain village, town, or whatever. But this is important to the citizens of Winnebago County. And I just want to express my feelings that everything that we're gonna be doing now goes to Winnebago County, not just take care of the village of Fox Crossing or something of this nature. We take care of Winnebago County. I think I've said that long enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Please go ahead, Supervisor Konecki.
And anything else to say?
Very good. So Supervisor Konecki is asking me to provide some of my thoughts on it. So I'll go ahead and do that. I gave a few of them earlier to a certain degree. So first of all, my first thought is this about the process we're going through. My first ultimate goal, and I was pretty clear on that to a number of individuals behind the scene, was I wanted to give this board an opportunity to consider this resolution. If I would have said no to a potential county board, then frankly, I would have not been able to give this board an opportunity. Now, of course, we've learned, however, that there is a way for the board to make that happen no matter what, through a petition, as we've done here today. But my first goal is what I was trying to tell you all, is to give the board the opportunity to speak and consider this issue. I didn't want to do anything to take away from that. That's very consistent with what I've tried to do all the time, and actually what I shared with you all, if you recall, with my parting remarks just 2 weeks ago, because I use those terms, transparency and inclusiveness in particular. And so that inclusiveness, of course, includes all of the voices in consideration from all of you. And I can tell you, I heard from many of you over the last 2 or 3 weeks that you wanted to have an opportunity to consider this with the current board as it stands. I'll give a couple other thoughts, though, however, beyond that. So first of all, there was a lot of discussion about process. And I'll be the first one to say, this is not an ideal process. I think we all know that. It's a unique situation. I can't disagree with that. However, when you always ask yourself that type of question, you have to ask yourself, if not this, what is the alternative? And the way I looked at it was this. The alternative realistically is this, that this board does not consider it at all. That then it's up to the next county board. However, the next meeting is an organizational meeting. It's not typically a business meeting. It's where the county board organizes itself for the next term, which then means the next business meeting realistically for the new county board is on April 26th. However, I think we can all agree, and pretty much everyone has said, we want as much information as we can get. So what that would realistically mean is the first opportunity for that next county board would realistically be a presentation and not a time for them to consider it. Which then that would mean that would realistically, in my view, put any consideration by the new county board realistically into the May timeframe. So then I had to be convinced, frankly, on the time limits. And frankly, behind the scenes, I shared that with multiple people as they know that those individuals needed to speak to the timeliness, not just to this board, but to me as well, because I'm obviously one of this board. And it first started when I was at the Board of Health meeting, and it was actually one of the staff members who then started talking about the projects and about the fact that for some of these projects, contractors or other projects in the community, contractors are being lined up. And those contractors are being scheduled. We all know that into the spring and into the summertime. So I go back to that alternative. If the alternative is for us not to consider it tonight, and potentially that would mean that the next board considers it potentially in May. I recognize there are different ways of doing it, but it'd have to be at least late April or sometime in May. I was convinced that, in my view, that would affect some of the projects and the abilities for them to actually get contractors in line on the schedule. I think we all know that there's a shortage of staffing and employees and a high demand for this throughout our country. So I did think that was a reasonable factor to consider this. The other factor I've alluded to, and that factor is simply, what are we really doing tonight? What we're really doing tonight is only two things. It's to accept the funding from the state, that's number one. And number two, we're allocating it to these various organizations. And as I said in my earlier remarks, anything dealing with sustainability, anything dealing with location, anything dealing with the specific logistics of the project themselves would be the purview of those individual boards for those organizations. There's only one on there, and Supervisor Rasmussen was absolutely correct. There's only one on here where that's not the case, and that's the Housing Resource Center for the funding at the county level. But every other project, ultimately, we would be allocating that funding, and long-term, any sustainability, any locations is up to those boards. That was frankly already demonstrated by the fact that we have a member who's on the Oshkosh Planning Commission, and that some of these locations have already come before the Oshkosh Planning Commission already. So when I factor all those things in, I'm not saying it's ideal and that we've gone through an ideal process, but you ask yourself on par whether it's better that we approve this tonight, allow these organizations to move forward, or we don't and effectively delay, but at least 1.5 to 2 months for these organizations. And on par, when you factor all those things together, I'm supportive of this resolution moving forward. So I wasn't planning to speak this evening. The Supervisor Konecki asked me to. Those are my thoughts. I see a hand from Supervisor Albrecht. Please go ahead, Supervisor Albrecht, and I think you need to open up your mic.
Can you
Your
hear
mic
me?
is now open, Supervisor Albrecht.
I was curious, after 3 years, what's the cost that Winnebago County has to put in its budget each year for this project? After the first couple of years, I believe there was my understanding that it's going to be taken care of by grants and everything else. After that, what is Winnebago County's amount each year after that?
Director Topol, are you able to answer that question?
Yes, I can answer that. This is a pilot project, and it is a limited term project of 2 years. And at the end of that 2 years, we will evaluate whether or not we have been successful, whether or not we've served the kinds of folks that we needed to, whether or not the program needs to be continued to be done by Winnebago County. And I would say that we're going to be looking for alternatives. We're going to be looking at, is it possible that other agencies can do this work rather than ourselves? Is it possible that we could do this in a format that includes, like, say, 211, something on the internet as opposed to something in person? So at this point, to answer your question specifically, we have allocated no dollars beyond the 2 years that this project will go.
Thank you, Director Topol. Anything further, Supervisor Albrecht?
Well, it didn't answer my question, but go ahead.
Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. Any other questions or discussion? Please go ahead, Director Collard.
In terms of, just to try to provide a more specific answer for Supervisor Albrecht, if the project were to continue in future years, the labor budget allocated for 2023 and 2024 for that specific program comes to $209,000 per year, average over those 2 years. So that'll give you some idea of, if there is no change to that resource center after 2024, we're looking at, $209,000 plus whatever the wage increases might be, subject to any change that may be made in the program, and whether it's even continued, as Director Topol mentioned.
Thank you, Director Collard. Any further discussion?
Yes, I have another question.
Please go ahead, Supervisor Albrecht.
Well, aren't we paying 400 and some thousand right now, and it's supposed to go to 800 and some thousand, and it was my understanding that was gonna be a continuation of that all total. So you're saying it's not gonna be any of that, correct?
Dr. Collard?
Well, it would be, there'd be $800,000 left unallocated. That would represent not only the labor budget for the resource program and human services, but also for the grant coordinator. The grant coordinator would definitely end at the end of 2024 because all the money needs to be spent by then. So that wouldn't continue past the grant amount.
Thank you, Dr. Collard. Anything further, Supervisor Albrecht?
No.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. Next speaker is Supervisor Cox. Please go ahead, Supervisor Cox. And if you could open up your mic, Supervisor Cox. Your mic is now open, Supervisor
Can you hear
Cox.
me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Can you? Okay. Chairman Ramos, I look at a couple of things. One, if this thing goes 2 years out, who then is viewing the auditing or taking a look at what is happening to it, say 6 months out, a year out, a year and a half out? How is that being monitored? And how don't we have some kind of a monitoring program aside from this that would go along with this resolution so that we don't get in a fix later on? The other thing is, why don't we have a maintenance program that takes a look at the little houses and takes a look at the shelter? Those things have to be added to and brought to life along with the program in order to make the program whole. In other words, at a later time, things are going to go wrong with the shelter or with the little houses. I know that the process was compressed, and you speak well of why we did it the way we're doing it, but we really don't have a solid way of checking on how the money is being not only allocated, but used in the construction of and the maintenance of the projects, each one, as we go forward. And that we need to have in there somewhere.
Thank you. Director Topo or Director Collard, do you want to speak to in terms of follow-upping and any auditing?
Well, I do think that that would be the primary responsibility of the grant coordinator position, which is included in this and covered by the grant. So what we would do is hire a project employee for a 2-year period to make sure that the projects were not only started, that the money was continued to be spent appropriately, and to provide us assistance with complying with the reporting responsibilities, because the state will certainly have various requirements for us to report on exactly how the money was spent and exactly when things are dispersed, and the grant coordinator would also perform that role for us.
Thank you, Director Collard. Anything further, Supervisor Cox? Please go ahead.
Yeah. Can we know who this person is either going to be, or who this person answers to at the county level, so that we know whether or not the actual audit is being handled on each one of these projects? Auditing is very important, and I understand a grant writer can probably do both auditing and writing grants, but do we know who that is?
Should I answer, Mr. Chairman?
Please go ahead, Director Collard.
I don't know who the person is. That can't be decided until after it's approved and we find the appropriate person. But at least right now, the budget transfer would move that funding into the miscellaneous and classified account, which is within the purview of the finance department. So I think as of right now, at least, I'd be probably that person's direct responsibility. But obviously, you know, the management team of the county would be involved as a whole, including Director Topol, Director Guerin, county executive, and so forth.
Thank you, Director Collard. Anything further, Supervisor Cox?
Let me get my hand down here. Thank you.
Very good. And Supervisor Cox, you brought up a good point in terms of the board itself certainly can ask in the future for these various organizations to come before the board and provide an update and let the board know how they're doing and how they've utilized the funds. We certainly have done that with funding at various organizations in the past, and I actually think for the future board that would be a good idea. So your point's well taken, Supervisor Cox. Go ahead, Supervisor Cox.
Chairman Ramos, is there any way that can be written into this, into the resolution? Any way that it can be handled so that we know that it's going to happen, say 6 months down the road or 3 months down the road or however? And
you could do that by an amendment. You could do that. You could simply do something very simple. Let's say on line 34, be it further resolved that each agency with allocation as outlined in this resolution would come before the county board to provide an update and presentation within 6 months or 12 months, however you want to do that.
On a continuing basis. Continuing on a continuing basis. That sounds like a good resolution to me. If we can write it up.
But are you asking for that motion? Is that your motion?
Yes, I would amend the resolution so that it would read that it would have an audit and a presentation every 6 months until the entire project in all cases, the entire project has completed.
So I guess I'm going to try to reword what you're saying, and it might not be exactly, but on line 34, I would say, be it further resolved that each agency that receives an allocation underneath this resolution would come before the county board within each 6 months period during the grant cycle. Is that what you were asking for?
Continuous, yes.
Yep. And that's what each 6 months would be. And then, of course, this board could decide if they want to change that at any point in the future, depending on things going. Okay, so that's
Chairman,
your motion.
Second.
Yeah.
There's a motion. Okay,
I
there's
got a second on that somewhere.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's a motion and a second. So we open it up for discussion specifically on that amendment language on line 34. Please go ahead, Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Wingrove.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually raised my hand for Supervisor Albrecht, who was waving. I'm not sure if he was waving for the amendment or something else, but that's why I raised my hand.
Very good. Supervisor Albrecht, was there something you wanted to speak about specifically on the amendment? Supervisor Albrecht?
You're muted, Dave.
On a second.
Oh, very good. Thank you, Supervisor Albrecht. So he did want to second it. So I'll next go to Supervisor Wingren, followed by Supervisor Brun. Please go ahead, Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wondered, are we into micromanaging again? Is Mr. Collard telling us he can do this anyway? We don't need to amend the thing. If he gives me his word, he's going to do this anyway. That's what I heard. Yes, can you tell us, Mr. Collard?
Dr. Collard, can you answer his question?
Well, yes, we will certainly need to make regular reports to the state. We don't have a schedule of those yet or exactly what they need.
And to the board then?
And we'd certainly provide that to the board, so we can
We
certainly do
don't
it. I
need
don't
that.
have any objection to the agencies
I
coming
was
as
just
well.
saying that we don't need that.
Mhm.
Thank you, Supervisor Winger. Next speaker is Supervisor Brun. Please go ahead, Supervisor Brun.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think presentations and an audit are a great idea, but I think every 6 months is overkill. I think it should read more like upon request of any county supervisor or committee maybe, that the different entities would come give a presentation and be accountable rather than having a hard set 6 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Brun. Next speaker is Supervisor Cox. Please go ahead, Supervisor Cox. And so this is your second time technically speaking on the amendment. Please go ahead, Supervisor Cox.
I'm just restating my need for the presentation is after the audit, and the audit should happen at least once every 6 months or greater than. But I believe that it should always have a presentation to the board in some manner, and each one of the entities should be involved in auditing their own. We don't know how this is going to turn out in the end unless we can track it as it goes. And I don't like the idea of transferring money and putting it in another entity's hands to work it out. We need to know how it is worked out as it goes, so we know when to stop or when to continue or when to add more money.
Thank you, Supervisor Cox. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the amendment? Okay, so the amendment was to add on line 34 to require each of the respective agencies to come before the board to provide an update and presentation every 6 months during the grant cycle. So we're going to attempt to do a voice vote. If it's not clear, we're going to go a roll call. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay or raise their Zoom hand.
Nay.
Okay, I think we're gonna have to do a roll call vote. So the clerk will call the roll. If you are in favor of adding that language on line 34, you're gonna say aye when she calls the roll. If you do not want to add it, you're gonna say nay.
Supervisor Konetsky, okay. Supervisor Brun,
Yes.
Supervisor Borchert,
Yay.
Supervisor Eisen. Supervisor Eisen. Chairman Ramos?
No.
No, thank you. Chairman Ramos, aye. Supervisor Konetsky? To amend it. Supervisor Defferting. Supervisor Lenz,
Yes.
Supervisor Wise. Supervisor Wise, no. That mean no? Thumbs down, okay, thank you. Supervisor Nussbaum,
Nah.
Supervisor Stafford,
Yes.
Supervisor Albrecht,
Yes.
Supervisor Gabbard, Supervisor Binder,
Yes.
Supervisor Conrad,
Yes.
Supervisor Shorsey,
Yes.
Supervisor Gordon,
No.
Supervisor Wingren,
No.
Supervisor Lautenschlager,
No.
Supervisor Norton,
No.
Supervisor Hins,
Yes.
Supervisor Zelmer,
Yes.
Supervisor Skellinger,
No.
Supervisor Buck,
No.
Supervisor Powers.
I'm happy to be notified when the state is notified, so I vote no.
Okay, Supervisor Cox,
Yes.
Supervisor Finch. Supervisor Finch. Supervisor Finch, thumbs up. Okay. Supervisor Youngquist. Yes. Supervisor Farr.
Yes.
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 Supervisor Rasmussen.
Yes.
Supervisor Keller.
No.
Supervisor Egan.
Yes.
Supervisor Ellis.
Yes.
Supervisor Snyder.
No.
Supervisor Jose.
Yes.
(21) 22 to 12. Sorry.
So by a vote of 22 to 12, that motion carries. So it is amended to add that language on line 34. So now we are back on the main motion, the main resolution as now amended. Any other discussion before we go to a vote? Seeing none, we're going to attempt to do a voice vote again. If there's not clarity, we will go to a roll call. Anyone has an objection to this approach, you let me know. We'll first try a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. All those abstaining.
Abstain.
Abstain.
Very good. With 2 abstentions, that motion carries. So that completes our business item since we just had the one resolution for this evening, actually. But I do want to thank you all for taking the time and being amenable to a special session. This is very unique, as you all know. So I appreciate all the deliberation, certainly all of your input throughout this process. So as a reminder, the next meeting would be an organizational meeting of the new board on April 19th. And with that, I will ask Supervisor Albrecht for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn till April 19th.
Motion is second to adjourn
Second.
until April 19th. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
That motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you all again, and thank you for all your efforts throughout the past 2 years. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, everyone. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Happy